Hey everybody, welcome back to PC Perspective. We are continuing our coverage of the ASUS Z97 lineup, and now we are moving on from the mainstream boards into what most people consider the flagship products from ASUS. This is the Republic of Gamers ROG line of boards. JJ is still with us.
Yes.
And we have different products laid out in front of us. We have a different demo system behind us as well. So we're going to talk about ROG motherboards, and if you're watching the live stream, we're going to give away a Maximus VII Hero at the end of this segment. So after we talk about the boards and go through a couple of demos, we're going to do another thing in the chat room. If you're at pcpro.com/live, you can enter to win a Maximus VII Hero. This is very board sitting right here in front of us. Probably not this one. Like, this one's probably broken.
Yeah.
But, you know, a board. This board in a retail package.
Yeah, awesome board.
Yes. So let's get down to it. Where do you want to start at with ROG? Features, looks?
I think we'll start off just a smidge on just understanding segmentation.
Okay.
So there's always generally a question mark. I think we talked a little bit about with the mainstream series, right? Is kind of what is the mainstream series kind of focused for? And we talked about the mainstream is really kind of master of all, right? In terms of whether you're gaming, whether you're doing content creation, productivity, it's a great board for everything. And even though ROG series is our focused gaming series, it doesn't necessarily mean that that this is your only option at looking at ASUS's product stack if you want to pick a gaming board. So I just want to preface that. With that being said, we definitely go all out at really trying to design and develop the ROG series geared towards gamers and hardcore enthusiasts. So guys that really kind of inherently appreciate, maybe more cultured aesthetics, right? They have a focus at wanting to have more tweaking and tuning options available to them on how they be able to work with the system. Yeah. And really kind of they go into that next layer of experience on how you can kind of have an enthusiast-oriented system. So, I think that's an important kind of consideration because it's very easy, I think, especially amongst what we're seeing with competitors adopting, I think, similar branding strategies amongst their different types of products, that it's always going to be more than just saying that the board is gaming, right? Sure. And I think for us, because I think all of you guys, and I respect you guys, and you guys are insightful enough to understand, well, just because my Dash A or my Sabertooth isn't called a gaming motherboard, that it's not a gaming system, right? It's not like I can't play any game that's out there, right? So it's more so that really the way that we see it is that based on your guys' feedback and the experiences that you guys want to have, we can design and tailor the boards with more specific feature sets that align with those uses and wants. Okay. And so that's what we're doing with our ROG. And getting back a little bit to the point that you talked about at the very beginning of the intro, with talking about that ROG is kind of the flagship, we do treat it in that respect of where we kind of try to look at ROG as kind of almost being our internal skunk works, right? Like our Black Ops kind of division, where we try to do stuff that might be out there on the curve as far as whether it's in the complexity or the cost implementation, but we're willing to do it for this platform to really kind of show our innovative kind of edge. Gotcha. So with this generation, I think that we definitely stepped up to do that. So let's go straight into it. First and foremost, we'll be showing a couple of different slides here in combination of what we're going to be dialoguing with, so you guys might want to keep that in mind in terms of what we're going over with. But one thing I want to just note, in terms of the initial board stack, it's going to be a little bit different. This generation, actually, we will not have an Extreme Series board that we traditionally offer in the performance-oriented chipset. So it doesn't mean Extreme's going away. Trust me, I can't get too much into it, but you'll see an Extreme board at a later date, but not for this chipset. Okay. So definitely, we're not leaving the Extreme platform in any shape, shape, or form. But for the launch of the Z97 chipset, what you'll initially see from us will be the Maximus VII Hero, and then the Maximus VII Gene, which is the micro ATX that we have over there. And then at a later date, you will still see that we will also come out with the newer Formula board, as well as the newer Impact board. So we will have a very robust...
Still plenty of ROG options.
Correct. Yeah. And there'll also be a SKU that we won't talk about too much more, but also for you guys that really liked the value proposition that we introduced last year with the Hero board, there'll be something coming out at a later date for you guys as well too that I think you guys will like. Okay. So let's first go ahead and just take a look at the aesthetic, and I'm going to go ahead and open up a slide here just to also give some contrast to this. And I think right off the bat, you guys are going to be able to see with the aesthetic, it looks different, but it looks inherently ROG, and that really was our goal for this generation, is that we really wanted to kind of distill the look and feel of the board and give it a cleaner look, a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more stylized focus. And I think that ROG has always really had a big focus on the aesthetics. If we go back really across a large number of years, ROG boards have really kind of been at that forefront of the expectation of what enthusiasts are looking for when they're building a system, and they just want it to look nice. And for this generation, you can see that we actually went ahead and we removed white accents from the motherboard. We went ahead and we went with just red and black, and we went with matte black PCB, and we went with nickel plating on the actual socket, as well as actually on the Supreme Effects cover. So this gives us just a really nice look and feel to the board. It gives it an overall kind of more aggressive and clean tone. But one of the things that's really different that you're going to see is going to be in this top portion right here, which you can see is actually a secondary color. So this is an entirely new technology that we went ahead and incorporated, which is our dual color PCB technology. So with the dual color, this was actually something that was very complex in terms of implementing. It took us a lot of trial and error process, because what happens when you go about designing this is that when the board goes through what's called the SMT, or the baking process, it actually changes the color. So what you'll see right here is not even the final version, but this version, actually the color is not exactly on the level of red that we want it to be. And we had to keep going through that process to find the color consistency and the color accuracy that we wanted to have when the board was final. But overall, we feel that it doesn't, of course, add anything to the board from a performance standpoint, but it adds kind of a really premium identity to the ROG series boards, which we think is unique, and also sets that kind of trend that we're going to do things that unquestionably no other motherboard vendor is going to look at from just the complexity and the cost consideration, but allow us to really help you guys feel that when you put an ROG board in your system, you're getting really kind of what we feel is the best of the best. So there's going to be these 3 color accents. One's going to be in the VRM, another one will be going through the PCH, and then another will go through the Supreme Effects module. So you'll see that each one of them has this nice kind of like little secondary red accent, which we think looks really nice. In addition to that, as part of the aesthetic, the PCH, this actually now features an acrylic material, and that acrylic material, directly on the side path of that entire acrylic material are red LEDs. So it'll directly backlight against that and have a really nice kind of lit up Republic of Gamers logo. So for you guys that want a nice clean stylized aesthetic, it looks awesome. So here's just a little bit of a slide contrast, so for you guys are interested. This is the Maximus VI Hero, which I thought was a really awesome looking board already. And this is just some of the ID revision. For you guys that don't know, we actually have an entire ID team that's dedicated to developing the look and the feel of the motherboards. And this is just giving you some of the perspective of what we did, where we were inspired actually by the angles that you have on military helicopters and the actual fans that they have on the helicopters. And so that's what's given us the focus here. And we implemented that. So you can see we go from that already black PCB, but to the matte black PCB, and then adding the dual color PCB along with the color accenting to ultimately what we have right there. So I think it's a really awesome looking board. Yeah. And you'll have the same overall kind of design aesthetic in the Gene series. If you want to show them the Gene model, you'll see that you have also the dual color PCB technology on that board as well, with a similar really high performance, high quality look and feel. And you can see right there also the heatsink design, which is this really nice, beefy, high quality heatsink assembly. It's got
kind of like the finish on it.
There is actually a special finish on it as well that gives it a little bit of feel, along with, of course, the angled cutting for the venting, and of course a centered heat pipe in there to make sure that we're thermally controlling, of course, all the temperature that's going to be coming out from those VRM components. And there's just an A and B between the 6 and the 7. So overall, you can see definitely maintains the lineage and kind of the look and feel, but I think really evolves it, and it's a really awesome looking board. So with that, let's actually go into really the kind of the meat and potatoes on what we've done for ROG. So first and foremost, in terms of what we're talking about for the boards, we have the power delivery section. So if we take a look at the power delivery section, we've gone ahead and gone through a number of improvements for this generation. So what we have right here in terms of the VRM componentry, as you know, ROG always focuses on giving you guys top class quality components. So this is the Extreme Engine Digi 3 power design. So we've got this really high grade, fully molded inductors. They're very high amperage, 60 amps in terms of that. We have these international rectifier integrated MOSFET and driver packages. These are pretty much the cream of the crop. Extremely high voltage thresholds, extremely good temperature efficiency and thermal efficiency characteristics. They pretty much have all the characteristics you would want from VRM-based components. And one of the cool things that you guys could keep in mind is that the efficiency and the performance of the VRM assembly is so good that if you guys wanted to really show this section of the board off, you could run it actually without the heatsink in place. So you could remove this heatsink and still run the board, and overall still have a very good quality overclocking experience. I would probably say that if you're heavily loading the system, so probably beyond maybe 4.4, 4.5 gigahertz, I probably recommend to keep, of course, the VRM heatsink in place, because even though the components are that high end, if you're having a very high thermal load onto it, you may get some thermal throttle. So it wouldn't be a question that anything that would like burn out or anything like that. Just be that the CPU frequency would maybe potentially come down a little bit. But if you guys are comfortable in that frequency range and you kind of just want to show off some of the aesthetic,
red LEDs along there in some fashion.
You know, you could entirely do it, and you could feel comfortable that the caliber and the quality of the hardware that we have on there is pretty much the best that you can get. And of course, for the capacitors, very similar to the Pro is now using the same caps that we've had now on ROG for a couple of generations with those ultra high quality 10K rated capacitors, which not only have that much longer lifespan, but they have significantly lower temperature tolerance and significantly higher temperature tolerance. And one thing to note is that some people always ask too, is that why don't we tend to use pos caps on our motherboards? And it's not a question that pos caps are an inferior solution. It's about understanding the performance metrics between pos caps and traditional capacitors. So pos caps were actually originally designed for areas where you have restrictive Z height. So this is the reason why you traditionally saw them like when we first implemented pos caps, you saw them on graphics cards.
On the back.
Because you couldn't actually fit a traditional capacitor on there. But if you take a look at what's called the ESR performance, so it's one of the performance metrics of how a capacitor responds, and the capacitance, so the actual power capability of a pos cap in comparison to a traditional capacitor, it tends to be about 2/3 to 1/3 less capacitance. And the ESR performance is actually considerably smaller. And that means that actually in varied temperature scales, a pos cap traditionally will perform worse. So it doesn't mean that it's a bad part. It just means that it's designed in specific scenarios. And so we use pos caps on GPUs, for instance, like I said, where it makes sense to use them. But on something like ROG, where we don't have a restriction in that area and it doesn't impact our ability, and we rather prioritize performance for the actual board, that's the reason why we actually don't use them. So it's not a question of saying, that one's a bad part or another part. It's just that we feel that it's a question that one makes sense to use more so in some conditions than in other conditions. So that just gives you guys a little bit insight. And there's continuity. The same quality of components that is used on the Hero is the same that's utilized on the Gene. So even though that Gene is a micro ATX motherboard, like we've really set the trend with Gene, you get absolutely that same ultra high performance quality in that VRM. So, great thermal efficiency, whether it's stock or overclocked, you've got more than enough that you could ask for.
It's impressive.
That was also one cool little thing too, just as another update that we've done, where we looked at everything, where we did that black nickel plating. We even did that to the IO shield. So even the IO shield has this nice kind of look and feel to it, which just adds the kind of that premium look.
Nice.
So interface is kind of one of the things that we've looked at, and there's a lot of different ways to interpret interface when you evaluate it. But one of the big areas that we looked at first and foremost, and it's not going to be the initial thing that we're going to talk about, because we'll talk about that more when we get into demos, is going to be the UI. But I want to touch on this initially, is that we've been working on a long time, Ryan, and you've been there since really the beginning, since even before we had AI Suite. And I remember when we first came out with AI Suite, and I said, hey, you're going to see a system utility that's actually going to be useful, it's going to be integrated, and it's going to buck this trend of that, motherboard utilities are garbage and they're bloatware, nobody wants to use them. And I definitely feel that we've reached that point. But what we've even wanted to do, more so as we've progressed through the years, is add more of a sense of UI unity and consistency. And we've done this really first and foremost now with ROG, where you can see that if you open up all the applications for this generation, from the Audio Manager to Sonic Radar to our ASUS Suite 3 to Game First, they all thematically have a same look and feel. And it's a minor point for sure. It's not going to be a feature or function, but we feel that ROG users, they care about this kind of detail, that they want to be able to go from their UEFI to the software and the environment and feel that there's a sense of continuity at how it all looks and feels, and that it's not fragmented. And while it is definitely a small piece, it definitely wasn't easy in accomplishing it because we have different teams that all work on this stuff, but we're happy to ultimately be able to have this for this generation. But moving beyond that, and getting to the meats and potatoes, a lot of you guys, of course, have keyboards, right? And,
I hope everybody.
Yes, and you're 100% right, and we all love our keyboards. And it becomes a very kind of a specific experience, because you don't necessarily want to trade the keyboard to get another keyboard because you like the layout or you like the tactile feel of it, or whatever it might be. There's a lot of different items that come into play. And ROG has had a really long history of innovation on all types of specialized functions and accessories that we've brought to motherboards and components that get tied into the board. And for this generation, we looked at how could we improve potentially the functionality that we could have for, let's say, a keyboard. And so what we did for this generation is we've incorporated an entirely new hardware IC that allows us to interface directly with the keyboard. And we're calling this technology Keybot.
Okay.
So you'll see right there, this is the actual Keybot hardware microcontroller. But if we flip the motherboard over, you'll see that that's actually on it's on the back of the motherboard. So this is a pretty awesome piece of hardware because essentially what it does is it interfaces directly with the dedicated Keybot port on the back of the motherboard, and then we'll link into the PCH because the PCH, of course, provides all your I/O, so like your USB and your USB 3 and whatnot. But what this gives us the ability to do is actually go through and have advanced control functionality. So a little bit later when we get to some of the demo functions, we'll actually show one of these abilities within Keybot, such as even having your system in an S5 state, so turned off, but still with power connected. We could go ahead and automatically boot straight into the UEFI with just the press of a delete key. Or if you want a single press and enable your XMP or enable CPU level up. So functions, regardless of any keyboard on the market, they don't exist. But we can introduce new types of advanced features in this. And this is just the beginning because since we own that entire chain of the firmware and the software environment, we can begin to progress even more and more features as we get feedback from guys like yourself.
That's not functionality you can adjust in software today.
For some of these, like let's say more advanced types of functions for stuff like booting straight into the UEFI or XMP, at this stage, no.
Okay.
But what you can do is you still have a whole lot of control over other things. So let's take a look at those things that you can actually adjust right now. So what you're going to have the ability to do is fully create your own macro keys, your own shortcuts, function keys, as well as smart logon capability. So you're going to have a huge amount of flexibility, and it's all going to be executed within a very simple to use application. So if we go ahead and open up this program and just minimize our PowerPoint right here, you'll see that you've got the Keybot program. You have a toggle button to turn this off and on. So of course you may need the ability to turn this off and on because you may jump into a program that already has those keys already mapped. So in that situation, of course, you wouldn't want Keybot to be off and you wouldn't want it to impact that. But you can then see here, you could go ahead and customize your own macro keys. Here you could go ahead and put in your smart login information. Function keys, you could go ahead and map any one of those to those different parameters. And shortcut, you could go ahead and map that to a different file or executable.
For example, if you go back to the function keys tab, if you have a keyboard that doesn't have multimedia functionality into it, you could use these the standard function keys that you may not use normally.
Yes.
Map them to play, pause, next.
To enable any of those, and even new functions that we're incorporating. And like I said, this is just the beginning in terms of what we're starting off with. As an example, we have escape mode. Escape mode is something that we developed on the front base, which was an add-in hardware, where if you press the button, it like auto minimizes everything that you have running and just takes you straight to the desktop. Right?
Do you have one that brings up an Excel spreadsheet?
No, but you could do that.
You can do that. Okay.
You can do that. So the cool thing is that it's as flexible as you'd like it to be, and as you can see right up here, we're thinking about the future and thinking about how you guys can work with this, where we have import and export capabilities. So you guys can download packs that might be customized for specific games or specific applications, as well as export and share those out into the community. And so this is going to be a staple that you're going to see on all the ROG motherboards for this generation. They will all feature this Keybot technology, and we feel this is a really awesome feature to introduce to users to be able to kind of tweak and tune and get the most out of their keyboard configurations.
Cool.
So really cool piece of setup that we have here. So next up, we take a look at another item that we have is going to be in networking. Now, networking is something that always gets discussed a lot, and and perennially, we've really been big fans of the Intel NIC. We've now had it on our motherboards for multiple generations, and as some of you guys have probably seen out there, there's been other competing solutions from other vendors, such as the Killer NIC. And definitely, it's not a question of saying that the Killer NIC is a bad quality network controller. It does what it needs to do, but our kind of goal is really always to analyze and look at what the solutions are at the marketplace and say, what's the performance that can be offered within it, and what's the flexibility and experience that we can have. And first off, when we take a look at just the platform level design, Intel, when they designed the platform, they actually have an MCU and a link-based mechanism specifically designed for the Intel network controller. So that means that it actually has an optimized place in the actual chipset level architecture and in the topology, as opposed to a traditional add-in network controller has to be added into a PCI Express link. So from a chipset level, Intel actually is, as you can understandably, I guess, say, right, they're optimizing their architectural chipset design for an Intel-based NIC.
Yeah, makes sense.
So, but you could say that is a given. That's, maybe yes or no, whatever it might be, but we feel that's definitely a valid point. from a second and probably more important point is going to be, we feel, performance. And so what we've done is we've actually done a lot of performance analysis. And what we've tried to do is actually go from a very low common denominator of performance. So we've used iChariot, which iChariot is really the industry standard for network evaluation. And we have a lot of experience with this because of our full networking division.
Right.
And what we did here is we went A and B apples. We didn't use our Game First packet priority software. We didn't even actually enable jumbo frame support. We didn't use any of the advanced options that the Intel ProSet Manager has, such as RSS, which is queue structuring for the network controller, MSIX, and a lot of really advanced options that are only available in the Intel NIC to improve performance further. Okay. So this is pure from a kind of stock perspective, if you want to think about it. And with iChariot, we set up a very real representation of it. And as you probably know with iChariot, one of the big advantages it has algorithms that they designed that simulate actual real-world usage versus just doing like point-to-point transfer tests. So we have one killer-based system, we have an Intel-based system, and then we have a client-based system that's the server. And then from there, we have 6 different servers that are essentially funneling traffic back and forth, just like a real system would be connecting to, and dynamically bringing down traffic up and down.
Okay.
And so we can see right here in terms of TCP performance, overall, pretty much everybody's pretty similar in terms of that. Intel, it wins out a little bit overall, but you could call it fairly close to a draw. CPU utilization actually is a little bit better on it than is going to be in the killer solution. But when we actually move over to UDP performance, which is actually much more representative and pretty much exclusively game packets all fall under the UDP packet prioritization, you can see that in that section, the performance compared to the killer-based solution is actually significantly better. So this is really, once again, the reason why that we decided to maintain with the killer-based, the Intel-based solution as opposed to the killer solution. As we go into larger, of course, UDP sizes, you can see that it becomes pretty pretty consistent in terms of performance. Although, as I noted, with the Intel ProSet management software, if other options were adjusted, these results could actually also be changed. But this just is giving you guys an idea in terms of why we've decided to maintain the selection of having Intel NIC. Because from our perspective, as far as ROG, we want to give you guys whatever the best choice is out there on the market. So we feel that we've done our due diligence to make sure that we're giving you guys an outstanding choice. So with that, though, we didn't stop there. We've had a big focus at doing packet priority software, and in previous generations we have had our Game First software.
Right.
And so the Game First software actually was co-done with a company called CFOS, who actually pretty much designed the application, and we worked with them to sometimes reset up the UI model and be able to tweak some of the engine elements. But overall, we didn't feel that it gave us as much granularity and control over the application experience that we wanted to have. And so for this actually generation, we're no longer utilizing that application, and we've actually entirely gone about designing the application in-house. So we co-worked with our networking division, and we actually leveraged a lot of their QoS technology that they already have built into routers and upcoming networking technologies that they've been developing. And we've pretty much now integrated that into a full software layer inside the OS environment. So we've brought direct packet prioritization technology from our networking division and brought that in. And that's what you're seeing here, is that essentially we're just able to optimize directly for game packets and evaluate that information and be able to have this now accessible in a really easy to use program. And so what you're going to see here is here's the actual UI model for Game First. It's a really clean, just stylized application. So you've got general optimization, which will by default optimize all game packets, as well as general application packets. So that means you could go from a game to jump into YouTube to watch the latest, PC per YouTube video, stream something on Spotify, or stream something on Hulu, and it wouldn't matter. It's not going to downplay any one of them. It tries to overall just give you the best performance possible. But of course, if you want to prioritize to the degree of affecting other services, then you could go in there and you could prioritize exclusively for game, for media streaming, for file sharing. Or you could go in and, of course, just quickly select that application, drop down, and pick a prioritization list. This also has a lot of additional information where we can do network monitoring. So we can actually track applications and how much bandwidth they use over time. So you can see an entire history of how much programs are using, and that's all inside this program. We can do bandwidth and ISP testing. So if you want to be able to test your performance, that's available to you there. You can assign networking information as far as to different controllers. So there's a huge amount of granularity and flexibility, and also because ultimately we're the ones that are controlling the software, we're going to even be able to listen more closely to you guys and the feedback that you guys give us to be able to fine-tune the experience overall. And the biggest part of this that we find is also valuable is that we're network controller agnostic. So while the user might come with an Intel NIC, we're seeing an increasingly larger number of users that are becoming comfortable using wireless as a form of connectivity.
Even on their desktops.
Yeah, with good quality, dual band solutions. ones, whether they're N or AC, you can get very good throughput, low latency, good gaming performance.
Yeah.
And with that, we don't want you to have to not be limited to not having Game First be a benefit. So just like on the mainstream series where you have Turbo LAN, can work with the Intel NIC or a USB wireless adapter or a PCIe wireless adapter, Game First doesn't matter. Any wireless adapter you put on the system, it will be able to work with it. So this is another update, and here's just you can see a run through of some of the different settings as well as some of the different options here. Of course, you can see that network monitor where I was showing you. You can track all your information and see all that good stuff. So we're really happy about incorporating that. So the last portion though here is that we didn't just look at the hardware-based implementation, the software implementation. We also even physically looked at the connectivity and the internal composition of the network jack. Now you might ask, well, what are you going to do with the network jack, right?
Yeah.
It's a jack, right? Well, we actually could do a lot. We went back and we evaluated the internal composition, and we felt that we could improve upon it. And Ryan, I think right there you've got two little items right there.
Yep, we've got two of these here.
So what you'll see is with the black network jack, that is the older one that's actually pretty much used on, even on ASUS motherboards, what has been used. And it works. It gets its job done, don't get me wrong. All you guys have been utilizing it for a long time. But the disadvantage, as you'll see, is that the composition of it, you can clearly see that one is a lot more looks handmade. And the reason why is that actually it is handmade. Those coils on those chokes, they're actually still handmade. So the quality and consistency can be slightly variable, and it also leaves very little space to be able to put improved circuitry for other things like surge or ESD-based protection.
Right.
Now, on our motherboards, we've long talked about how we've had class-leading ESD and surge and spike-based IC protection on things like the USB ports, right? Well, guess what? For this generation, we've now shifted over to having these nice SMD-mounted components, which are much better quality, and they also afford us to have much more space. So you can see that what we've been able to do is integrate ESD guards as well as surge protection on that. And the reason why is because we were still seeing it. When we would get RMAs, we'd sometimes have people, you go through like a surge, spike, brownout, things like that, and it does. It can short out the actual Ethernet jack, and sometimes you get packet loss or becomes more intermittent in terms of its detection capability, or at worst, the port essentially actually browns out entirely and it fails. So you plug in a cable, and even though your cable's good, it doesn't work anymore, and so you have to RMA the board. So this is part of an overall initiative that we're calling called Gamers Guardians technologies. So there are things that we have on the boards that most of the time we actually don't message on our motherboards, like the improved ESD or the IC-based protection circuitry that's on there. It's just a given when you bought an ASUS board as a whole. But there's going to be continued items like this that we're going to continue to fine-tune and improve upon so that ultimately you guys get better quality. So you can see in 3 stages, not only improving the jack, but of course, the selection of that Intel NIC, and then combined with that Game First packet priority software, feels that we're giving you that great networking connectivity and performance. So that's just a close-up shot for you guys there. If you guys did not see it there when Ryan was showing you.
It's probably a little better there.
Older generation design, newer generation design.
Gotcha.
And this will be on all ASUS ROG Z97 motherboards.
Okay.
Okay. So next up is audio. So audio has, of course, been something that for a long time ROG has focused on. And you've been very familiar, if you go back to even early ROG motherboards, you remember the Supreme Effects daughter cards that it's had. So it's always been a focus for us. And for multiple generations, we led the industry with having that isolated audio path. And we've, of course, seen now competitors, though, try to mimic similar designs. We still feel that we have the best isolation audio design out there. But with that, we went back to the drawing board and looked at saying, well, as always, we feel it's not just the spec, but it's the experience. So how could we improve the experience for you guys as gamers and enthusiasts? Well, there's actually, we felt a lot more that could be done, and we've done that for this generation. So what we've gone ahead and incorporated are a number of new innovations on the ROG series of motherboards. The first one is the actual op-amp implementation, which we're going to call the Sonic Sense amp. So if you take a look at that isolated audio section, of course, you can see the isolation audio path. You can see the audio capacitors, which actually are not Nichicon audio. They're Elna audio, so they're even a higher grade form of audio-centric capacitors than what we put on our mainstream series of boards. You have the shielding for the audio codec as well. And of course, you have the operational amplifier. But
that's the chip right below the shielding?
It's going to be a little bit harder to see, yes. But that op-amp, what a lot of users don't know is that, let's say, you've got a headphone. So like right here, I just have these headphones in my hand. Most headphones that users buy on the market are usually rated between 32 to 64 to about 150 ohm.
Okay.
And it's kind of like monitors. You might be asking, well, why am I bringing monitors in? Well, monitors come in different refresh rates. And sometimes what happens is people buy the monitor and you connect it, but nobody ever knows that you have to manually set the refresh rate. So you have to set like 120 or 144 hertz if it's
if you've got
higher
one
than
of those
the
higher end monitors.
Exactly.
Right.
So you're not getting the best experience out of it. Well, it's actually very similar. Your headphone will always work, even if it's a higher impedance, but the issue is that you might not get the full experience of the headset because the drivers and the diaphragm, everything's been designed to be driven at that higher impedance setting.
Okay.
So what we've gone ahead and integrated is this Sonic Sync amp, and with some specialized design implementation, we now have the ability to automatically detect the headphone impedance. So I'm just going to quickly show this to you, just so you guys can see what I'm talking about here. So we're just going to go ahead and minimize Keybot, and I'm going to plug this into my front headphone port, which is, it's exclusive to the front headphone connection, so it's not for line out, because the majority of you guys are always going to plug your headphones into the front headphone port. Okay. And what you'll see there is you get a little pop-up message, and you can see it says detecting headphone impedance, detected it, and says your headphone impedance is between 65 to 150 ohm. We've selected the actual in-between level, which is what we refer to as powerful, and then from there we press OK. And if we see here, we actually have 3 different driving strengths. One would be performance, would be the default for like the majority of 32 ohm headsets here in the middle, and then extreme, which would be for 150 ohm or higher.
Okay. Yeah.
So at that point, now it's automatically been set. A very simple process, but something actually took a lot of work to be able to actually develop and integrate on the motherboard. So it's something that we feel adds just a more seamless experience to gamers and enthusiasts to be able to get the best experience for their music, their movies, or their games. So with that, though, we didn't stop there. We also continue to look at what else could we make improvements on. And with that same incorporation, we've gone ahead and incorporated a hardware-based register adjustment to the op amp. Now, this is kind of complicated to understand. I don't want to get into the audio minutia of it.
Yeah.
But some people, you might remember, like on some of Zonar cards, and some competitors have talked about that you could swap out an op amp. Now, that can be good in some situations, but what's very important to understand is when an audio engineer designs an audio path, many times the op amp is specifically tailor-made to that entire audio path. And just because you can change it doesn't mean that you should, because the actual soundstage and the properties have been designed for that op amp. Now, you can design a soundstage set of circuitry that has more flexibility so you can change things in and out, but it becomes more complicated to be able to ensure the consistency of the audio experience. And there's also the realistic reality of if you go about changing the op amp, are you going to do that once you've already got the motherboard mounted inside your chassis? You want to go in there and take like little tweezers and like pull it out and swap it in. It's not necessarily maybe the easiest process.
Okay.
So we said, well, how can we try to give you the same exact experience on a true hardware level, but without having to go through all that? And that's what we've developed with Sonic Soundstage. We can modify what's called the hardware register of the op amp, which will actually change the full audio experience in multiple ways, giving you full different sound processes, but without being without being software-based and being hardware-based. So you see that there's a button on the bottom of the board that's called Sonic Soundstage. And when you press that button, it will go through 4 different fully audio-tuned parameters that give you different sonic experiences for your playback medium. So
now, can you adjust that in software in any fashion?
Actually, you can.
Okay.
So even though we have that pre-programmed, right, on a pure hardware level, which also the reason why I've incorporated this is, once again, like some of the things we talked about on the mainstream series, this is a great feature where if you have users that are using SteamOS, where the audio driver is very limited in terms of what's capable, here you can once again have an improved sound experience or different experience with even that type of operating system environment. But if we go ahead and go into the audio manager, you'll see that here Sonic Soundstage can be enabled in the OS, because once again, a button only does you good if you can get access to it, and if it's inside your chassis, I can't do anything with that button, right?
Correct.
So here I can go ahead and enable it or disable it, and I also have access to making a different adjustments to that hardware register. So this is a very advanced hardware level of control that we're making available to you. But in addition to that, we didn't also stop there. We still wanted to progress even more in terms of the customization experience you could make to audio, and we've done that with Sonic Studio. So Sonic Studio, we've completely overhauled how you can tweak and tune the audio experience, and we've listened to a lot of what really gamers want, and a lot of them really wanted focused audio customization on in-game experiences that were around virtual surround, clarity, bass, and things along those lines. So that's what we've really focused on specifically, and that's what we now have available to you here, where you can go in simply into the audio manager. And the great thing about Sonic Studio as opposed to the other ones, because it's internal software DSP based, it can work for the line out or for the front headphone. So either one you can fully benefit from the Sonic Studio, as opposed to Sonic Soundstage is exclusive for the front headphone based connection.
Okay.
So in this situation, and actually, interesting enough, you could decide to do A and B, because you could combine them if you wanted to as well. You could run Sonic Soundstage with Sonic Studio, or you could do them in opposed. It just depends on what's the experience that you're looking to define. And we actually have a video here. So if
do we need to unplug the headphones for that?
No, because that goes out through the line-out-based connection.
Okay.
But I'll go ahead and remove that just as a precaution.
Otherwise, I don't know what will happen with our audio mixer.
Okay. No worries.
We'll see. Okay.
And we'll just go ahead and make sure that we've got our settings here to default. So we're just going to see that that's been reset, because that's only for the front headphone, Sonic Studio. And it's very simple, as you can see here. You just click onto it, you can enable it, or you can disable it. And you can see down here we have, for games, music, movies, you can go in and you can fully customize it and adjust them all. And also right here, just like Keybot, we have importing and exporting. So we're going to allow you guys to also share that. We're also looking at maybe developing customized profiles for different game titles and openly releasing those to the community. So we have ones, for Battlefield, for Titanfall, for whatever it might be, as well as, like I said, getting feedback from you guys on what you guys want to be able to share and giving you guys that capability. So some pretty awesome stuff there. So we're just going to run just a small part of a video here that we recorded internally, where we essentially did line-out recording, and we've incorporated this to a pre-render kind of cool video that we have here with some ROG robots, getting it on. And from there, you're going to see an A and B difference between Sonic Studio turned on to Sonic Studio turned off.
Okay.
Of course, you guys, there's compression, there's the internet, and playback mediums, and all kinds of stuff going to involve here. So this is just a very basic demonstration of it. I'm going to be giving the file to Ryan, and he might maybe incorporate it into the video, or maybe separately upload it. Or it might also be available potentially, I think, on our own YouTube channel if you guys want to check it out. I'm not sure yet, but one way or another, you guys could also probably try to experience this in a different way, because, of course, with audio, there's always a subjective element within what you may be able to interpret. But before we play that, that's one other touchstone that I do want to make, is that while there's definitely subjective aspects to the audio, one thing that is always going to be really a guarantee with an isolated audio implementation like what we have here is a removal of the noise floor and an improvement to gain. So gain will directly correlate to volume. So you're going to have inherently a higher volume range available to you. So if you were to open up your media player and set one to 40, and then set another one to 40, the other one that's even set at the same level will actually be louder. Will actually offer a higher dB and a higher SNR. So even if you're somebody that doesn't necessarily know if you're hearing better tonality or more detail or clarity, those are two things that unquestionably are an improvement that you guaranteed to get.
Very objective, measurable things.
Yes, correct. So let's just go ahead and play that back there for a little bit. And so, like I said, guys, what we've done here is we've pretty much just recorded it to allow you to have an A and B. So here we have Sonic Studio off. There's Sonic Studio on. So let it go through one more time, and then we go ahead and we'll continue on here. What we're talking about. So something hopefully you guys got a little bit of the experience that you get there with Sonic Studio. And I'll definitely tell you, even from an audiophile perspective like myself, which I really consider myself an audio gearhead, I've actually been really pleased with this. And I've found that the simulated surround, especially for guys, we tend to see this in first-person shooters that really care about having the virtual surround aspect. I've found to actually be a very good algorithm, and I've been really impressed with it. So, sometimes there can be that kind of perspective that's like gimmicky, or it's like it's gamey and it's not something I want to utilize. And we spend a large amount of effort to make sure that we felt that it was actually adding real value to you guys from a gaming experience versus just being an add-in, right, that nobody's going to ever use. And one point to also make is that we've simplified the whole accessibility experience of this. If you notice, I've never left the audio manager. It's not a separate program. So when you default install the audio manager, all these functions are built in a really easy and accessible way to you, so that you don't have to worry about jumping from one program to another program. As long as you install the audio driver for the system, it's there and it's waiting for you to be able to take advantage of it. So it makes, I think, the process just a little bit easier about making sure that you have everything that you need to work with. So that is audio. And lastly, I think this was also a question from somebody on Mainstream.
We had a question earlier.
Yeah, we maintain the DTS Ultra 2 PC codec package for this board as well. So while we're not using some of the things that we did for the Mainstream series with the DTS profiles and things along those lines, we still keep the DTS Connect package. So for you guys that want the multi-channel re-encoding,
right,
that's also still here on these boards. Because we have a lot of feedback from gamers, like I said, they want to outport to, you know, like I said, a receiver, a soundbar, television.
Yep.
Okay. So that is going to be everything on the audio side. So lastly, just as an update for you guys that care about from previous generation, we've actually had a lot of people that liked using the Sonic Radar, but they asked for more flexibility at being able to control the UI. So we've gone back and entirely redesigned the UI model, given more flexibility at how you can tweak and tune the positioning, the placement, transparency, size, all kinds of things. Plus, the biggest thing was to be able to add application profiling to different games. So that means now for this generation, you can have one for Titanfall, you could have one for Battlefield 4, you could have one for, you know, for Ghosts.
And you can vary these.
And you can vary all the settings per each one, because before you would have had to change it every single time you went into the game. So you can imagine how that could be sometimes a little bit frustrating.
Oh, sure.
And we realized that, especially for gamers that actually liked using the feature, so we wanted to make it much easier for users. So now at this point, they can do application profiling specific.
Does this make you any better at games?
You know, I love actually first-person shooters, but I like to play single-player campaign parts as opposed to multiplayer. But I did actually find it did help me as far as where I found where it helped me the most was in, I'd say, cornering, or in areas where it was something on off axis or harder to see off the screen. So yeah, I'd be like turning a corner, right? And I'd be getting gunfire, and I wouldn't necessarily know in which direction or how many people might be in that direction. And by getting that gunfire, I would be able to see, oh, I get more people are coming from my left flank. So if I'm only there, because I don't want to have to get capped and get respawned. So, you know,
it has to happen sometimes.
It does have to happen sometimes.
But
you know,
watches our game streams.
Yeah, but you know, if I don't have to die as often, I'm a fan of that. You know, so I'll take that any attention it gets. But Titanfall has been pretty fun though for multiplayer. So, so that's Sonic Audio. So moving here into protection. You know, this is just something to kind of wrap out our Gamers Guardian technologies, where we talked about that there's always going to be a lot of things that you don't necessarily see on the motherboard that improve the experience or the kind of the reliability. So, of course, we've already talked about the onboard components. We've got other things like overcurrent protection that are on the DRAM circuits. We have the ESD guards that are behind the audio, the USB 3, the USB 2, the Ethernet jack that are all there. Even backplates are areas that you're going to see sometimes other vendors will cut corners on that we're not, or even things like the I/O. We actually only do stainless steel plating to the I/O, but this is true for actually pretty much all ASUS boards, and other vendors will actually use carbon plating. And it's not a big performance difference, but the difference actually comes into play over time in terms of the reliability, especially in areas, you guys not so much, but if you get into areas like in Texas, the South, the humidity, exactly, it can actually oxidize the backplane, and sometimes the internal composition can get worn a little bit more. And sometimes it'll affect the actual connectivity quality. So it's minor, but it's one of those things where it's just, it makes a small cost difference when you're producing the board. But for us, since it's an ROG board, and even other ASUS boards are actually also using stainless steel, we just view it as an area that we can improve the quality on, so we don't cut the corner there. So it's small things, like I said, most of you guys are probably never going to realize that it's there. But it's part of an attention to detail that we feel if you're buying what we feel is the best products on the market, we should be paying attention to those things. And this is another one that it's interesting. We had some competitors come out with some similar messaging last year approaching what they said was isolated USB design, which if you guys go out there, I'm not going to comment on it. You'll see that I don't think it necessarily is added up to what they're communicating. But one thing that we want to add some light to is we've never talked about it because it was a given. Once again, we've had an actually isolated USB power delivery design on ROG motherboards since 2007. It's been a non-negotiable technology that we felt that to give the boards the best interoperability and compatibility and reliability, you actually need to isolate the power path for the USB. Because when you go to initialize a device that's bus powered, if sometimes the power variability comes into play, it can affect the interoperability. This is also the reason why, if you actually perennially look at partner companies that design products like this, ASUS is generally the board of choice for them because of this type of design detail. And pretty much that's what this is just showing you, is that we essentially have an isolated path. So as the power comes in, it goes directly to this actual power buffer, which then powers those ports directly so that you always get a consistent power stream. So once again, something that we don't message because we focus a lot more messaging on the features as opposed to necessarily design elements. But one of those things that hopefully helps you feel more confident that when you really get an ROG board, you're getting an improvement in really every way that we possibly can put onto the board. So moving from that, the last portion is just kind of wrapping out some of the software value add before we just talk a little bit about the topology here on the board. And the UEFI, we've already done a UEFI kind of little bit walkthrough on the mainstream series. And everything that we talked about on the UEFI, Fan Expert 3 that we talked about, that's all 100% all on here. The USB 3 boost, the USB Charger Plus, that's all on here. So a lot of those technologies that we all brought over from the mainstream that we haven't talked about, remember, those are all on here too. So when we add that, I feel total value proposition, there's a huge amount of stuff that you have. Secure Erase is still exclusive for ROG motherboards in the UEFI. So for you guys that want to be able to always, secure erase your volume, get the best performance, it's there. RAM disk software, we've gone ahead and updated for this generation where you have dynamic memory addressing. So you guys that want to be able to install applications, work directly from a RAM disk volume that's even persistent. That's included with the boards. And a big one, Kaspersky, the AV software, remember, this is a full 1-year license version that comes included. It's not a trial. This is a full 1-year license. If you just go buy this, it's at least going to cost you $25. So it's a given, especially for online gamers where you're connecting to different servers, you're downloading different packages. It's important to have a good quality, actually, antivirus protection mechanism. I always recommend it. Now, of course, if you're a very good user and you're careful about what you download, you don't necessarily need to even run one. But if you want to be really the best protected, then it doesn't hurt that we're giving you one for free and included
it's there. It's included.
And same thing with Damon Tools Pro Standard for guys that want to be able to take advantage of imaging software, mounting software. That same thing. That's included. It's a full version. It's not license restricted. So those are additional value adds that we have with the ROG boards. And one other UEFI update that we did is we did also add in full GPU information that's registered inside the UEFI. So you can see everything from your clock speeds to your temperatures to the VBIOS. Just because for ROG gamers, they care a lot about their GPU configurations and they want that information. So it's been expanded upon. But as I noted, everything that we talked about already on the UEFI side is also on the ROG series of motherboards. So let's go ahead and just lastly take a look a little bit about the topology here and just, I guess, go over some of just the quick differences. So if we take a look at the storage array configuration here on our Maximus VI Hero, you're going to see that we've got the serial ATA ports on the board. So
no SATA Express.
Correct. So with ROG boards, because we've spent a lot of really the money and the time and the effort on prioritizing other design elements and functions and features, still to have a premium board but keep it cost competitive, we don't have SATA Express, but we still offer you the M.2 based implementation. So the M.2 implementation you're going to see is right here, but this one's a little bit different, whereas the Pro and let's say like the Deluxe and the Mainstream will offer cross compatibility with SATA and M.2 PCIe. ROG boards will exclusively support PCIe only. And the main reason why is we see in the enthusiast community for ROG, users really want to always keep their Intel PCH ports active. They don't want to lose those ports. They tend to run sometimes complex RAID array configurations on those ports, so we always want to keep those active. So we've decided to make the decision to not do any colaying there, so under no conditions do they lose essentially those Intel ports. That will always remain active. And you'll then be able to, of course, run here if you want PCIe solutions, which are, of course, going to be faster than the SATA solutions.
I mean, you could have done that on the mainstream boards, too, right? As long as you were specific to pick a PCIe
For 100%, yes. But we still worry that in reality that there's going to be users that mix and match. And also with the mainstream series, because we see a more varied type of usage model as far as how users approach building their systems, we want to give more, like I said, flexibility. If you look at mainstream series, the boards also are spec'd in that way, right? We give you Wi-Fi, we give you dual NIC, we give you, try to give you almost every single connectivity point. While on RG, we try to distill it down to really what most users tend to want from a performance perspective. In addition to that, though, we do add some additional connectivity on the Gene as well. You'll see that both the boards feature not only M.2, but also supplementary AS Media 1061 driven SATA ports. So you got more than enough connectivity for that board as well. So in that respect, that pretty much shows you everything that we have there on ROG. Now, one other point that we have, of course, is we keep that Fan Expert 3 technology that we talked about before with every fan header supporting the DC and the PWML capability. And if you guys remember that we talked about the little temp header probe, all the ROG boards, both the Gene and the Hero, will support that, whereas on the channel, like the Dash A doesn't have it, but like the Pro and the Deluxe do. So it's on ROG, it's kind of a consistent point that you'll have available to you there as well, and having that flexibility to define.
So why do we have a VGA port?
You know, that's actually feedback, you know, where we have to design the board for other regions as well.
Yeah.
And, you know, while we are still, you know, for definitely in the North American market, most users are going to probably run just a discrete GPU.
Sure.
They won't even use the iGPU ports. It is almost no cost to us to integrate the VGA function. So we went ahead and integrated it for, you know, just support for some of the other regions that have the board. So,
okay.
Yeah. I personally, you know, and I'd love to hear your guys' feedback. We'd love to.
Can you put a parallel port on there too?
No, we'd love to actually pressure the team into putting even just more connectivity. Like the PCH actually has up to 14 USB 2 ports. I'd rather have 2 more USB 2 ports than having a VGA port. And so that's something that, you know, we'd love to get your guys' feedback on. If you're in that same camp, you know, if you'd love to see more of that versus having that. But, you know, we do get some people that do use the iGPU. And so, you know, if it's a question that you want, also have maintain that. Because for me personally, and this would be another question for you guys, I don't see any reason to put even HDMI or DP on the board at all. I really feel for an ROG motherboard that you're only going to use a discrete GPU.
The only thing that'd be useful for is like troubleshooting and demos and things like that.
But you know, you guys aren't demoing your system, you know, and troubleshooting. You know, it is a value proposition. You're 100% right that maybe it helps you. You know, and what I've thought about there is, you know, you could have an HDMI extension cable where we could do that through an add-in cable. So you could imagine like we could have an HDMI header, and you could just have essentially like a little card that comes out that gives you that HDMI port, but that physically doesn't impact our I/O.
Right, that's a good idea.
So if that respect, if
you still have that troubleshooting option, but yeah, the functionality.
But if I could give you, you know, 4 more USB 2 ports or 2 more USB 3 ports or something, I'd rather take that than have connections that I'm probably not going to use.
I agree.
You know, we'd love to see your guys' feedback on that. So both these boards are awesome. You know, I think that we've put in a lot of work if you consider everything from the mainstream feature set that we've discussed to the exclusive ROG-related features like Keybot, Supreme Effects 2014, Game First Packet Priority software, the special UEFI options, the software suite, plus it's compatible with the other add-ons that we talked about, whether it's going to be the Thunderbolt 2, that's going to be supported. You got the Qi wireless charging and the NFC box. Both of those guys are going to be supported.
Supported but not included.
Correct.
Right.
Supported but not included, as well as those other functions like we talked for and demoed for Media Streamer, as well as Home Cloud and Push Notice are all going to be compatible as well with the ROG series ports.
It's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah.
It's a lot of stuff.
And like I said, make sure to stay tuned for you guys that are looking for some stuff that is going to be special. We're just getting started as far as what we're going to be doing. On the rest of the board stack is, like I said, we have Formula and Impact coming.
Let's see, we had a couple of questions focused on...
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
But just one last point. Some of you guys are wondering about, and this is just a part of the ROG accessory ecosystem. You know, we talked about all that isolated audio path, and, you know, with ROG, we're also... really happy to also say that we offer the ROG front base and the OC panel. I had an OC panel here, I forgot where I put it. But if you guys remember, you guys can, you know, Google Bing OC panel and you'll see it's a little external control box that came with our Maximus VI Extreme.
Right.
But we sell it as a standalone accessory now. So it works on all ASUS ROG Z97 boards. You can do the OC panel, and we recently introduced the front base, which is also compatible with all ASUS ROG Z97 boards. And the great thing about the front base is if we spend all this work on that front audio connection, right, the front base is right now really the only way to 100% guarantee the best headphone connection and microphone experience, just because we'd love to see chassis partners improve the internal cable quality, but as of right now, they're in that same game of dealing with cost versus other factors, and sometimes you still have lower quality cables that impact the line level quality. So if we just take a look here, this is kind of what you're going to see. This is the dual line stereo separated shielded signal that comes included with the front base to really be able to give you that best headphone and microphone experience. So overall, we're trying to keep the whole ecosystem of how to make sure that you guys have that best experience. So any of you guys want to get a front base or you want to get an OC panel, we'll work with any one of the boards.
Very cool.
Yeah. You were saying?
So we had some questions that were ROG specific. We answered a couple of them about the caps. Why the VGA port? Is the Keybot for USB only? Does it work with the PS2 port?
That's a very good question. So there is a dedicated single port. It'll actually be listed on the I/O shield. I believe, if I remember right, it's this port. It's not a USB 3 port. It's a USB 2 port on the back of the board, but it will be specific to that one port.
So only a single USB port
Correct.
is wired to go through the Keybot
for that
chip,
Keybot, yeah. So as an
and then
example,
goes into the PCH.
right. So as an example here, actually, that's a good time, I guess, to demo that function
we can
here.
do that.
We can demo this. So I'll shut it off. But I've got here. This is a Corsair. What is it? I think this is the K90. Is this the K90?
Yeah.
Yeah, K90. Yeah, so this is the K90. So most of these USB keyboards, usually some of them have like a USB hub. So you have two connectors. So you plug the keyboard connection into the Keybot, but not the hub cable. So the hub cable is usually the one that gives you that auxiliary
extra connection for mouse or whatever you're going to use.
Exactly.
Yeah, headset.
So let me just go ahead and shut off the system. So I'm going to go shut down.
This is probably my favorite feature on all the ROG boards.
It is a pretty awesome feature. So the board will be shut down, and what I'm going to go ahead and do is with Keybot turned on, I'm going to press the delete key. So just let me make sure my system actually turned off. Let's spin it. Everything's off. Okay, that's good. So you can probably
he just pressed the delete key, and now we hear the fans spin up.
And so now you're going to see it's going to boot straight into the UEFI.
That's it. That's all. That's it. That's all. That's the end of the... Nope, we're done. There's no more discussion about motherboards. That's the only thing for 2.5 years since you started coming out to do these. It's like, hey, I really like the easy way to get in the BIOS. So I don't have to sit there and tap delete over and over and over again, and you miss it sometimes.
So for you guys, we didn't cover it on the mainstream, but the mainstream still does at least have the DRCT function, so you guys can run the reset cable to that DRCT header, and so you can have your reset button serve as a single button to reboot to the UEFI. And all the boards also still come with this little software, which is a direct to BIOS software switch too, so you can do this from the OS as well.
Gotcha.
Yep.
All right, so we're going to give away our Maximus VII Hero motherboard.
Right. Maximus VII Hero.
We're going to give you the special word to type into the chat here in just a second. And then we'll answer a couple more questions while we wait for everybody to input their result. So the secret question, are you doing this over there or am I doing this over here? Okay. It's the feature we just demonstrated. The name of the chip, the feature.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. So what feature on the Z97 ROG motherboards allows you to direct interface with a USB keyboard?
Yes.
Not a PST keyboard, as we just discussed.
Yes.
But a single USB keyboard.
It's going to work.
Why? You don't think so?
So I typed it in properly as 2 words.
It's 1 word.
Yes, it is technically. It is not separated. Yes.
It's 1 word.
It is.
I'm running it with 1 word.
We can't both be running it.
Oh, really?
I don't think so.
We'll see what happens. So let's answer another question here. Is there an API for Keybot so open source programmers can make a Linux interface?
That's a good question. Actually, Keybot, since it's hardware based, doesn't require that. We can have this work entirely under even Linux or SteamOS. As of right now, we're still internally discussing, though, making an API or essentially a front end available so that if you guys want to be able to have the customization aspect inside of the Linux OS environment, that you have that available. And I think as we probably get closer with a larger level of maturity for SteamOS, that is something that we're definitely considering. As of right now, I can tell you that the ROG team, we have expanded a partial side project team to be able to support Linux more directly in that respect. So we'll continue to monitor and evaluate that.
All right, let's see. We've answered that one. Is Fan Expert 3 a software upgrade, or are there different controllers involved? I think we discussed about this with the DC versus PWM.
Correct. It's hardware, firmware, and software. All 3 are required. So Fan Expert 3 is exclusively on Z97 motherboards. It is not possible to retroactively put any of the functions from it into previous generations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Does ASUS have any other Thunderbolt accessories planned to complement now that we can actually release a Thunderbolt EX?
As of right now,
card?
Yeah. As of right now, we just have the current 2 Thunderbolt EX2 cards. So there's that single port card and there's the dual port card. We are looking into the possibility of some other Thunderbolt options, but all I can say is that we need more bandwidth. So down the road.
Can this card work on Z87 boards?
No, the pin header is actually different. That's due to some compliance with the PCH interconnect.
Okay.
So it is technically pin incompatible with previous generation boards.
All right. All right. So time is up. The answer was Keybot. I think once the chat room starts getting flooded with all of one word, if you didn't know what the answer was, it's very easy to just type in that answer and get something. So I'll pick the winner on this side.
No, I already picked it.
You did it? All right. What do we got?
Bugsy.
Bugsy? B-U-G-Z?
No, B-U-G-S-Y.
B-U-G-S-Y. Bugsy wins ASUS Z97 motherboard, the Maximus VII Hero.
It's an awesome board, Bugsy. I would.
Are you jealous?
I'm a little bit. I mean, I'm totally gonna get one, but I would love to hear what your experience is working with the board when you actually get to try it. So, like I said, you feel free. Email me, email JJ, PCDIY@asus.com. I will write back to you because I want to hear how it was you getting to work with the board because we put in a lot of work into it.
So Bugsy, send a PM to Ken or questions with your email address, and we will get your information from you later today or tomorrow. So congratulations on that. Coming up next, we're going to take a quick break here, take a drink, and then we'll be back to talk about our final two series of motherboards. We're going to quickly talk about the Tough series.
Yep.
Which has the Sabertooth, which is a very popular option for people.
Sabertooth and the Griffin.
The Griffin, and then the Workstation series.
Yeah, just one board, but it's an awesome board.
It is still a series, though, right?
Yes,
it just happens to be a series of one.
A series of one.
So we'll be right back if you're watching live, and if you're watching us after the fact, it will be the next video on this playlist. Thanks, guys.